Titan Lux was more than a hotel. It was Big Shaq's empire, his legacy, his untouchable throne. But when he checks in undercover, two employees' whispers stop him cold. Big Shaq? Biggest fraud in the business. At first, it sounds like nothing but bitter gossip until he starts digging. Hidden meetings, secret accounts, dirty money. His name stamped on deals he never approved. Someone inside his own empire is playing him, using his power for their own game. But Shaq didn't build his empire to be stolen. Now the man who created it is about to tear down the ones who thought they could betray him, because in this game, only one king survives. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The grand entrance of the Titan Lux Hotel was designed to impress. The polished marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of the chandelier, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne and fresh-cut flowers lingered in the air. Bellhops in tailored uniforms moved swiftly, carrying designer luggage, their white gloves pristine, their movements seamless. This was luxury at its peak, a world of power, wealth, and exclusivity, and Big Shaq owned all of it. Tonight, however, he wasn't here as the billionaire behind the empire. He wasn't here to shake hands with investors or to make a grand entrance surrounded by cameras. Tonight, he was just another guest. Dressed in a tailored black hoodie, designer jeans, and sleek black sneakers that cost more than most people's rent, he exuded a quiet, controlled dominance. His gold-rimmed shades hid his sharp eyes, his jaw was set, and his presence alone demanded attention. But for now, he wanted to be invisible. No grand treatment, no VIP escorts, just pure observation. He approached the reception desk, walking at an unhurried pace, every movement deliberate. The moment he stepped forward, the two receptionists, Olivia and Carter, stiffened. Not in recognition, but in the way employees do when a guest walks in with an aura that suggests money, power, and a lack of patience for incompetence. Olivia, mid-20s, brunette with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, plastered on her best customer service smile. Carter, a lean man in his early 30s, had the look of someone who had been in the business long enough to stop pretending he cared. "Welcome to Titan Lux. How can we assist you this evening?" Olivia's voice was smooth, practiced, her tone just the right balance of warmth and distance. Shaq slid a black American Express card onto the counter. "I need a suite," he said simply, his voice low, deliberate. Carter picked up the card, barely glancing at it before typing into the system. "Checking in under what name?" Jermaine Cole. A fake name, but not just any fake name. A name chosen for a reason. Olivia's fingers hesitated on the keyboard for just a second before she resumed typing. "One of our penthouse suites is available for the night," she said smoothly. "Top floor, private access. Would you like a personal concierge?" Shaq shook his head. "Just the key." She handed it over without another word. Transaction complete. Smooth. But just as he turned to leave, his sharp ears caught something. A low whisper. "Can you believe this place? People really think Shaq built this empire clean?" His grip on the key card tightened slightly. He didn't turn around. Not yet. Carter chuckled under his breath. "Man's a myth. All that self-made crap. If people knew what really went on up in that penthouse." His voice trailed off, a knowing smirk curving his lips. Shaq's jaw clenched. His first instinct? Turn around. Call them out. But no. He exhaled, slow and controlled, swallowing the sharp burn of his own ego. Instead, he walked away. Not because he was letting it slide. But because of this? This was just the beginning. The Titan Lux lobby hummed with quiet elegance. The muted sounds of clinking glasses from the lounge, soft jazz floating through the speakers, and the occasional ding of the elevator created a luxurious atmosphere, one that Big Shaq had designed himself. But in this moment, standing just a few feet from the reception desk, all of it faded into the background. His grip on the key card was firm, his posture relaxed, but his mind, sharp as a blade. He wasn't supposed to hear it. He wasn't supposed to be standing here, lingering by the concierge desk under the pretense of checking his phone, giving them the illusion that he wasn't listening, but he was. And what he heard? It burned. Olivia's voice, low and laced with amusement, cut through the air like a knife. That guy? Biggest fraud in the business. Shaq didn't move, didn't react. But inside something snapped. Carter exhaled a dry chuckle. Man, if people really knew what went down in that penthouse. His words trailed off, the kind of unfinished sentence that invited questions, that invited doubt. Shaq had no doubts, because what the hell were they talking about? His penthouse? His name? His empire? The same empire he built from the ground up, the one he sacrificed blood, sweat, and sleepless nights for, now being dragged through the mud by two nobodies behind a desk. His jaw tightened. He could walk up to them right now, shatter their illusion, drop the mask, pull off the shades, and let them feel the weight of his presence. Make them choke on every syllable of their reckless little conversation. He could. But that would be too easy. Shaq wasn't here to be easy, so instead he stayed silent, calculated, a wolf in the skin of a passerby, blending into the scene, listening, studying, memorizing. Olivia sighed dramatically, tapping a manicured nail against the desk. It's actually hilarious. All these guests checking in, paying insane money just to be part of the luxury experience. Meanwhile, the guy running it? Nothing but a front. Carter hummed in agreement, crossing his arms. The real money isn't in the hotel rooms. It's in the deals nobody talks about. Shaq's stomach curled with something he didn't like. This wasn't just bitter employee talk. This wasn't just some half-baked gossip. They knew something about his penthouse, his name, his business. And whatever it was, they felt damn comfortable talking about it. His mind raced. He thought back to every board meeting, every partnership, every damn contract that had crossed his desk. Nothing in his operations, not a single deal, was dirty. So what the hell were they implying? Were they just talking out of pocket? Or was something happening right under his nose? Carter leaned in slightly, lowering his voice, though Shaq still caught every word. You know, I heard something crazy the other day. About who really comes through those penthouse doors after hours. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Carter smirked. Let's just say if cameras were rolling, Shaq's business empire would collapse overnight. Shaq's blood boiled. He had heard enough. But instead of marching up to them, instead of shutting them down right here, right now, he simply turned on his heel, his movements smooth, controlled, dangerous. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. If someone was moving behind his back, using his empire for something he didn't authorize, he was about to find out. And if these two thought they were onto something, they had no idea who they were really talking about. 3. A VIP guest with a hidden agenda. The penthouse suite of Titan Luxe was a masterpiece. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing the New York skyline, handcrafted Italian furniture resting against sleek marble floors, and a bar stocked with bottles worth more than most cars. Everything about it screamed power, exclusivity, dominance. And Shaq had built it. Every detail in this suite was a reflection of his vision. Yet tonight, it felt different. As the elevator doors slid open and he stepped inside, the air carried an unfamiliar weight, a tension that shouldn't exist in a place that belonged to him. He stood in the center of the massive space, taking in the room that should have felt like his throne, but now felt like a crime scene. Were Olivia and Carter just bitter employees, running their mouths to stir drama? Or was there something deeper? Something real? The thought made his jaw tighten. Shaq moved to the bar, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. Not because he needed it, but because he needed a moment to think. His empire was built on precision, control, and an ironclad reputation. If someone was moving under his nose, using his name for something dirty, it wouldn't just be a problem. It would be war. He pulled out his phone and tapped into the hotel's internal logs. A perk of being the owner. He could see who checked in, who booked meetings, and who had access to what. And that's when he saw it. A high-profile guest had booked a private meeting in the hotel's executive lounge tonight. Nothing unusual on paper, except the name attached to it. Vincent Morello. Shaq exhaled slowly. The name was familiar, but not in a way he liked. Morello was a political fixer, a shadow in high places, a man who made problems disappear, for a price. He didn't operate in the open. If he was here, if he was having a closed-door meeting inside Titan Lux, that meant something was being arranged, buried, or bought. And now Shaq had questions. Instead of calling security or making a scene, he took another approach, testing the staff. He picked up the hotel phone and ordered room service. Not because he was hungry, not because he needed anything, but because he wanted to see who walked through that door. 10 minutes later, there was a knock. Shaq opened the door to find a young waiter, barely 25, shifting on his feet. His uniform was crisp, his demeanor professional, but his eyes wouldn't meet Shaq's directly. Something was off. Shaq stepped aside, letting him roll the cart in. He watched as the waiter moved quickly, setting up the table, adjusting silverware with nervous precision. Shaq let the silence stretch before he finally spoke. "Busy night?" The waiter hesitated. "Always, sir." Shaq leaned back against the counter, arms crossed. "You been working here long?" The kid nodded. "Couple of years." Shaq watched him closely. "And in those couple of years, you ever seen something that wasn't supposed to happen?" The waiter's hands froze. Just for a second. A split-second hesitation. But Shaq caught it. "Excuse me?" the kid said, forcing a polite smile. Shaq let the moment linger before shaking his head. "Forget it." The waiter gave a stiff nod and turned to leave. But as he reached the door, Shaq spoke again. "Tell me something." The kid turned. Shaq's voice was quiet, but heavy. "You ever serve Vincent Morello?" The waiter's face drained of color. That was all the confirmation Shaq needed. The door clicked shut, leaving Shaq alone again. He exhaled through his nose, his grip tightening around his whiskey glass. So it wasn't just gossip. Something was happening inside his hotel, something that had his name tangled in it. And whatever it was, Vincent Morello was at the center of it. Shaq grabbed his phone, checked the time. The meeting in the executive lounge was still happening. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was personal. And now? Shaq was about to make his next move. The Titan Lux Hotel bar was dimly lit, exuding a refined luxury meant to make even the wealthiest patrons feel like they were in an exclusive world of their own. Gold-accented shelves lined with the rarest spirits, leather bar stools polished to perfection, and a jazz trio playing softly in the corner set the scene for quiet indulgence. But tonight, Shaq wasn't here to indulge. He had played it smart so far, blending into the shadows, collecting information, and controlling his temper. But now, he needed answers. The only way to get them? Push until something broke. His target sat at the far end of the bar, Olivia and Carter, the two receptionists who had been running their mouths about him. They weren't working now, which meant they'd be looser, more reckless, and less careful about what they said. Perfect. Shaq took his time approaching, walking with a confidence that didn't need to announce itself. He didn't sit directly next to them, not yet. Instead, he slid onto a stool 1 seat away, close enough to listen but not too close to tip them off. The bartender, recognizing a high roller when he saw one, gave Shaq a respectful nod. "What'll it be?" Shaq didn't break eye contact with the row of bottles in front of him. "Whiskey. Neat." The bartender poured the drink smoothly, placing it in front of him without a word. Shaq lifted the glass, swirling the amber liquid once before taking a slow sip. He needed to let the moment settle, let Olivia and Carter become aware of his presence without suspecting his intentions. And then, he struck. "I gotta say," Shaq said casually, his voice carrying just enough weight to make them pause. "This hotel's got a reputation." That got their attention. Carter, mid-sip, glanced at him sideways. Olivia, more brazen, leaned back slightly, eyeing him with curiosity. "Oh yeah?" she said, swirling the wine in her glass. "And what reputation would that be?" Shaq smirked, as if he were just making idle conversation. "Depends on who you ask." Olivia chuckled, resting her elbow on the bar. Now that's the right answer. Carter, always the quieter of the two, studied Shaq carefully. Something about him was setting off alarms, but he couldn't quite place why. Shaq tilted his glass slightly in their direction. "You two work here, right?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "And you figured that out how?" He gave a small shrug, playing it smooth. You've got the posture of people who deal with guests all day but don't get paid enough to smile after hours. That made Olivia laugh. You're not wrong. She eyed him for a moment. You a regular? Shaq smirked. Something like that. The conversation was shifting exactly where he wanted it to go. He took another slow sip before delivering the first real hit. So, tell me, he said, voice casual but loaded. What's the real story behind this place? Carter and Olivia exchanged a glance, just for a second. But it was enough. Shaq caught it. The hesitation. The unspoken, how much should we say? Olivia was the first to break the silence, her smirk widening. She leaned in slightly like she was about to spill something juicy. You wouldn't believe the kind of dirt this place is built on, she murmured. Shaq raised an eyebrow, masking the anger brewing in his chest. That right? Carter, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass, finally spoke up. All I'll say is, Big Shaq ain't the king he thinks he is. Shaq's jaw tightened. For a split second, his fingers flexed around his whiskey glass, but he caught himself before the emotion could show. He forced a small chuckle, tilting his head. That's so? Olivia smirked. Oh, trust me. If people really knew what went down in those penthouse suites, Titan Lux wouldn't be a 5-star hotel. Shaq leaned in slightly, his ego bruised but his curiosity sharper than ever. And what exactly do people think is going down? Carter hesitated again. It was subtle, the kind of pause that only someone trained in reading people would notice. But Shaq caught it. Olivia, on the other hand, was enjoying herself. She took a slow sip of wine before saying, Let's just say, the real money in this place doesn't come from the bookings. Shaq narrowed his eyes. Then from what? Carter finally gave in. He let out a breath, rubbing his temple. You ever heard of Vincent Morello? Shaq's stomach twisted. He kept his expression locked, unreadable. Name sounds familiar. Carter nodded. Yeah, well, he's familiar with this place. Shaq exhaled slowly, setting his glass down carefully. He'd heard enough. But the way Olivia was still smirking, the way she had no idea who she was really talking to, made something dark curl in Shaq's chest. She had one more thing to say. One of these days, Big Shaq's gonna find out what really goes on in his empire, she mused. And when he does? She clinked her glass against Carter's. I hope I'm around to see it. Shaq let the silence linger for a moment, let them sit in their little illusion of knowing more than they did. Then he smiled. Just slightly, and he got up. Olivia and Carter watched him go, still completely unaware that they had just spoken to the man himself. But that wouldn't last long. Because now, Shaq wasn't just looking for answers. He was hunting for the truth. The Titan Lux penthouse had always been more than just a suite. It was a statement, a symbol of power, exclusivity, and untouchable wealth. The kind of place where the world's elite came to cut deals, indulge in excess, and discuss things that never made it to the headlines. Shaq had designed it that way, but only for those who played by his rules. Tonight, he was realizing that someone had rewritten the rulebook. From the balcony of the mezzanine level, hidden behind the dark-tinted glass of a private lounge, Shaq watched as a high-rolling politician stepped out of the executive elevator and into the penthouse corridor. His stride was smooth, confident, the kind of walk a man takes when he knows he's above the law. In his right hand, a briefcase. Shaq's stomach tightened. He had hosted some of the most powerful men in America, but this one wasn't just another VIP. He was Senator Alan Draper, a man with a clean public record but dirty whispers behind closed doors. Shaq watched as 2 Titan Lux staff members, both in high-end suits, not the standard hotel uniforms, greeted the senator. No formal check-in, no pleasantries. This was prearranged. He knew every inch of this hotel. He had never authorized any meetings in the penthouse tonight. So what the hell was going on? He slipped out of the lounge, moving with quiet purpose. Years of navigating the business world had taught him how to walk like a king. But tonight, he moved like a ghost. As the staff led Draper down the hallway, Shaq followed, keeping his distance, watching. Then, something strange. Instead of heading to the main penthouse suite, they turned left, toward a private elevator that wasn't supposed to exist. Shaq's pulse quickened. This wasn't part of the original blueprint. Someone had built something into his empire behind his back. The staff punched in a code. The elevator doors slid open. Draper stepped inside. Shaq barely had time to process what was happening before the doors closed, and the senator disappeared. A slow, simmering rage built inside him. Who had the nerve to build a hidden VIP section inside his own property? And more importantly, why? He needed to see it for himself. Shaq wasn't a man who relied on guesswork. He wanted proof, and proof was always buried in places people didn't want you to look. Using a staff-only access panel, he slipped into the back corridors of the hotel, a maze of maintenance halls and restricted areas only top executives had clearance for. Every door, every hallway, every inch of Titan Luxe had been designed with his approval. Except this. He found a newly installed security panel near the service elevator, a sleek, high-tech keypad, far more advanced than the standard hotel security. This wasn't for employees. This was for ghosts. And then, he saw it. A hidden doorway built seamlessly into the paneling. Shaq exhaled slowly. Someone had gone through serious effort to keep this under the radar. No cameras, no obvious surveillance. This wasn't just some VIP lounge. This was something else. He found a keycard override device hidden in the folds of his hoodie, a little trick he always carried for moments like these. Within seconds, the panel light turned green. The hidden door clicked open. He stepped inside. The room was dark, windowless, silent. A place that wasn't meant to be seen. Shaq reached for his phone, activating the flashlight, the beam slicing through the blackness. And what he saw made his jaw clench. Files, stacks of them, organized in precise, deliberate rows. Financial records, transaction logs, client lists. Shaq grabbed a file and flipped it open. And that's when he saw his own name. Wire transfers, large amounts, money being moved through Titan Luxe accounts. At first glance, it looked like he was laundering money through his own empire. Except he wasn't. Someone was using his name, his brand, his company to move illegal money through accounts he hadn't authorized. His grip on the folder tightened. This wasn't just about some dirty politician making backroom deals. This was bigger. Whoever set this up had spent months, maybe years, building a hidden operation inside Titan Luxe. The perfect cover. But now, Shaq had found the cracks, and when he found cracks, he didn't patch them up. He burned the whole damn wall down. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think rationally. He needed to move carefully. If this got out the wrong way, the media wouldn't dig for the truth. They'd crucify him. His reputation, his power, his legacy, all of it could go up in flames overnight. He needed to know who was behind it, and more importantly, who thought they could get away with it. Then, the unmistakable sound of leather shoes on polished floors. Shaq froze. The hallway outside. Someone was approaching. The sharp, deliberate stride of a man who wasn't a hotel guest. Shaq closed the folder, sliding it back onto the desk. He moved quickly, efficiently, stepping into the shadows of the room, blending into the darkness. The door unlocked with a soft beep. And then, he saw him. A man in his early 50s, slicked back silver hair, an expensive navy blue suit, and a posture that screamed authority. Shaq knew that face. Not personally, but he had seen him before. A high-ranking finance executive. One of the men he had shaken hands with years ago. Someone who had praised Titan Luxe in interviews, claiming it was a model of modern luxury hospitality. Shaq's blood ran cold. This wasn't some low-level scam. This wasn't rogue employees cutting side deals. This was a full-scale operation. And the men behind it, they had power. Real power. The man walked toward the desk, adjusting his suit jacket, oblivious to Shaq's presence in the dark. He reached for a tablet on the desk, scanning through documents, muttering something under his breath. Shaq's fingers curled into a fist. His entire empire had been hijacked from the inside. Now, it was time to take it back. Shaq pressed himself against the cold steel frame of the hidden room, breath steady, mind sharp. The executive, the man who had hijacked his empire from the inside, stood just a few feet away, scanning documents, unaware that Shaq had just uncovered his entire operation. Shaq's fists clenched at his sides. He had spent years building this place, turning Titan Lux into a symbol of power, exclusivity, and control. His name, his reputation, his empire, being used for someone else's game. And now, he was done playing along. The moment the executive's back turned, Shaq moved. Silent, calculated. He slipped through the door and back into the hidden corridor, disappearing into the hotel's maze of service passageways. He knew the halls better than anyone, because he built them. Within minutes, he was in the main lobby. The space was grand. Towering chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, marble polished to perfection. It was the crown jewel of his empire. And tonight, it was about to be the scene of a reckoning. Shaq walked with purpose, shoulders squared, every step carrying the weight of a man who was no longer hiding. He reached up and removed his gold-rimmed shades, tucking them into the pocket of his tailored hoodie. For the first time tonight, he let himself be seen. The moment the front desk staff recognized him, the air shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Employees froze. A group of VIP guests seated near the bar turned their heads, sensing something they couldn't yet define. And then, Olivia and Carter, the two receptionists who had been talking about him just hours ago. Shaq locked eyes with them as he approached the counter. Their faces went pale. Carter's mouth parted slightly, his fingers gripping the desk like he needed something to hold on to. Olivia, to her credit, recovered quickly, but Shaq saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. He stopped in front of them, his voice low, controlled, dangerous. "You got something to say about me?" His gaze never wavered. "Say it now." Silence. The kind that weighed heavy. Carter swallowed hard, glancing at Olivia, hoping she'd carry this conversation. She did. Because Olivia wasn't the type to back down. Her chin lifted slightly, a fire igniting in her stare. "You want to know why people talk about you?" she said, voice sharp, edged with something personal. Shaq didn't blink. "Enlighten me." Olivia took a step forward, her posture defiant, shoulders squared like she was bracing for impact. "Because for all your billions, your power, your empire, you don't even know what's happening under your own damn roof." The words landed like a slap, not because they were disrespectful, but because they were true. Shaq exhaled through his nose, slow and measured, forcing himself to keep his anger in check. "You think I don't know what's going on in my own hotel?" Olivia let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I think you just found out. Otherwise, you wouldn't be standing here." The tension was razor sharp now. Shaq leaned in slightly, voice dropping just enough to make the moment intimate. Lethal. "You got two choices," he murmured. "You either tell me exactly what you know, or you find a new job. Right now." Olivia's lips parted slightly, but she wasn't intimidated. If anything, her frustration boiled over. "This isn't about me," she shot back. "This is about your people, the ones running this place behind your back. We've seen things. We've heard things. And you think you own this empire?" She shook her head. "They do." Shaq's patience snapped. He turned toward the concierge desk, toward the hotel's top executives, the ones standing nearby, watching the confrontation unfold, too afraid to step in. His voice boomed across the lobby. "Who's been signing off on unauthorized accounts?" His eyes swept the room. "Who's been approving financial transfers that don't go through me?" He gestured toward the penthouse. "And who the hell let a senator use my hotel to wash his dirty money?" Dead silence. And then, movement. From the side of the lobby, the same finance executive from the secret VIP passageway stepped forward. The man who had been standing in the shadows, pulling strings inside Shaq's own empire. The executive adjusted his cufflinks, composed, but not fearless. His gaze met Shaq's with the confidence of a man who thought he was untouchable. "Mr. Shaq," he said smoothly, "I believe we should discuss this in private." Shaq took a slow step forward. "I think we should discuss it right here." The executive's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, sir, this is a delicate matter." Shaq laughed once, a sharp, humorless sound. "You know what's delicate? The reputation of this hotel. And you just bet my name on a dirty deal. The executive exhaled through his nose. This is business, Shaq. We make strategic moves. Sometimes that means making alliances. Shaq's temper flared. This isn't an alliance. This is a scam. His voice was steel. And you put my name on it. For the first time, the executive hesitated. That's when Shaq knew. He was guilty. He had expected Shaq to be absent, blind, oblivious. But tonight, Shaq was standing right in front of him. And he wasn't just asking questions. He was taking back control. The executive straightened, trying to salvage what little power he had left. Mr. Shaq, this operation was built to benefit you. You just didn't know about it yet. Shaq shook his head, exhaling through his nose. Wrong. His eyes narrowed. You built it to benefit yourself. A pause. Then, Shaq spoke the words that sealed the man's fate. Pack your shit. You're done. The weight of those words hung in the air. The executive's face paled. You don't mean that. Shaq stepped closer, voice deadly calm. You want to find out? For the first time that night, the man looked afraid. And then, security stepped in. Not hotel security. Shaq's personal team. 2 towering men in black suits, earpieces in, eyes sharp as knives. The executive took a step back. Shaq, don't. Shaq cut him off. You played your hand. Now take the loss. Security moved in, gripping the executive by the arms, escorting him toward the exit. Guests whispered, staff stood frozen, and the empire that had been played was back in the hands of the man who built it. Shaq exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders back. His rage hadn't faded, but the first move had been made. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But tonight, he had sent a message. Titan Lux belonged to Big Shaq, and no one was stealing it from him. The night had flipped the game on its head. Shaq stood in the heart of Titan Lux, the empire he built from the ground up, knowing now that it had been used for something filthy, corrupt, and dangerous, all without his knowledge. He had spent years perfecting every corner of his empire, ensuring no one could shake his foundation. Yet tonight, someone had. And now it was time to find out who. The lobby was still thick with tension. The executive who had been pulling strings behind his back was already gone, dragged out by Shaq's own security. His staff was shaken, whispers crawling through the room like electricity. Some of them had no idea what had just happened. Others? They had known all along. But Shaq's focus wasn't on them anymore. It was on Olivia and Carter, the 2 employees who had been running their mouths about him, throwing dirt on his name, acting like they knew something no one else did. And now, Shaq had to ask himself, what if they did? He turned toward them, eyes sharp, cutting straight through the layers of their uncertainty. You 2, he said, his voice like steel. My office. Now. Neither of them argued. They knew the real conversation was about to begin. The penthouse office was silent, a stark contrast to the chaos below. The sleek interior, the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city, the perfectly curated decor. It was all meant to exude control. Right now, Shaq didn't feel in control. He stood behind his massive desk, arms folded, his presence heavy with power and expectation. Olivia and Carter stood across from him, their expressions unreadable, but their body language tense. Shaq didn't waste time. You weren't just gossiping, he said, voice low. You knew something. A beat of silence. Then, Olivia exhaled, shaking her head slightly. We weren't just talking, she admitted. We were investigating. Shaq's jaw tensed. Investigating what? Carter finally spoke up. You, your company, your money. He met Shaq's gaze, hesitant but firm. Someone inside your empire has been laundering money through Titan Lux. Someone high up. Shaq felt his pulse slow, controlled, measured, his body's way of keeping his anger from boiling over. You're telling me, he said, voice dangerously calm, that 2 front desk employees decided to take down my entire operation? Olivia smirked slightly. We're not receptionists. She reached into her bag, pulled out a sleek black folder and tossed it onto the desk. Shaq didn't move. Not at first. Then slowly, deliberately, he opened it. Inside? Proof. Transaction records, signed approvals that never crossed his desk, forged documents linking his name to accounts he never authorized. And at the bottom? A list of names, one of them belonging to someone in his inner circle. Shaq exhaled through his nose. Who do you work for? Olivia didn't hesitate. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Carter nodded. We were placed here to monitor suspicious activity, to see if you were the one running the show. Shaq let the weight of that settle. They had been watching him. They had come here believing he was the problem. Now they knew better. He lifted his gaze from the file, looking at both of them. And? Olivia met his stare, unwavering. And you're not the one we're after. Shaq exhaled slowly, rolling his shoulders. Damn right I'm not. The documents in front of him told a story. One he didn't write. His empire had been hijacked from the inside. And he knew exactly where to go next. The boardroom. The place where the real decisions were made. Shaq stormed into the executive boardroom with the kind of presence that made walls shake. The men seated at the long glass table. His board members, his investors, the people who were supposed to be protecting his business, turned their heads in shock. They weren't expecting him. They damn sure weren't expecting him to know. Shaq walked to the head of the table, but he didn't sit. Instead, he tossed the black folder onto the table, letting the pages spill out in front of them. I'm gonna make this real simple, he said, his voice cold. One of you is a snake. Silence. Uneasy glances. Then, movement. A man near the middle of the table. Gerald Vaughn, his chief financial officer, reached for one of the papers, flipping through it too quickly, too calculated. Shaq caught it immediately. Vaughn's fingers twitched. His throat bobbed. He looked up, attempting to mask his guilt with confusion. Shaq, what is this? Shaq leaned forward, pressing both palms on the table. It's your way out. A slow, tense pause. Then, Vaughn laughed. It was forced. Uneasy. A man trying to maintain his composure as his world fell apart. This is ridiculous, Vaughn scoffed. If you think Shaq cut him off. Save it. His eyes narrowed. I already have what I need. The doors swung open behind him. Security. The same team that had removed the other traitor from his lobby hours ago. Only this time, Shaq didn't need to say a word. Vaughn's face paled. Shaq, listen. You used my name, Shaq said, voice even. You moved money through my business. You tried to frame me in my own empire. He shook his head slowly. You don't get to talk anymore. Security stepped forward. Vaughn stood abruptly, chair scraping against the polished floor, hands raised in protest. Wait! Shaq's voice cut through the room like a blade. You're done. And just like that, he was. Security grabbed Vaughn by the arms, dragging him from the room as he sputtered, grasping for a defense that didn't exist. Shaq watched, his face unreadable, as another piece of the problem was removed. The rest of the board? They didn't move. Because they knew. Shaq wasn't just the man who built Titan Lux. He was the man who would burn it to the ground before letting someone else take it from him. The night wasn't over. Shaq stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, whiskey glass in hand, staring out at the city. His city. He had spent years thinking he had control. Tonight he had learned the truth. Control is an illusion. There were always men in the shadows, always hands trying to pull strings behind the scenes. But now he knew where to look. A new game had begun. And this time, he wasn't playing defense. He was coming for them. All of them. Betrayal doesn't come from the outside. It starts within. Big Shaq built an empire, but even he wasn't safe from the ones moving in the shadows. Power isn't just about what you own. It's about who's trying to take it from you. So pay attention. Watch who stands beside you and who's waiting for you to slip. Because in the real world, the game isn't about winning. It's about making sure no one takes what's yours. Think you'd see the betrayal before it hits? Think again.